Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today, we're returning to Fallout 76, where we're going to spend another 1,000 scrip with the Purveyor on 3-star ranged legendary weapons. And as always, I'll take a few moments to talk about each one, about what makes them good, bad, or indifferent. So let's go on ahead and get started and see what we get today. So for our first roll, we got a Nocturnal Fat Man, with replenishing action points with each kill, and plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. So the Nocturnal effect, it's not as bad as it used to be, because when they rebalanced the legendary effects, they removed the debuff during the day, so that it doesn't get any bonus damage during the day, but at least it's not doing less damage than a non-legendary version of the weapon during the day. So that is definitely a big improvement. Now, the big drawback is that you really have to remember to switch weapons based on in-game day and night, and I'm definitely not the type of player who would remember to do that. If you are, then the Nocturnal effect could be pretty good for you, although I'm not sure a Fat Man is really what you're going to be wanting it on. Fat Man is definitely not the kind of weapon that most players are going to be running around with as their primary weapon. It's the kind of weapon that you would maybe keep on hand, especially if it had the 90% weight reduction, just to fire those mini nukes that end up in your inventory from time to time rather than just dropping them, because that's a little more fun than just dropping them. So, but yeah, I don't really think that this weapon, based on the first star and the weapon itself, are going to be all that good. The second star is a solid second star, replenishing action points with each kill, but with a weapon like this, even if you are using VATS, which one thing to keep in mind with the launcher weapons is that if you're using VATS, then if you miss your VATS shot, then it's possible that the shot will just kind of go off into nothingness and you won't get your explosive damage from it either. So I'm not saying don't use it in VATS, just something to be aware of if you do choose to use it in VATS. That's not necessarily a huge drawback, but at the same time, since you can only have one mini nuke in the Fat Man at a time, if you are dropping back out of VATS after every shot while you reload, then chances are you're never really going to run out of AP, so the replenishing action points with each kill is probably not that big of a thing there. And you know, even if you are not doing that, then theoretically you should be dropping enemies pretty quickly, which should drop you out of VATS unless you're using the Gun Fu to automatically take you over to the next target. So, you know, I don't think that the second star is very useful, even if the first star had been better here. And then the third star, plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. Unfortunately, it does not synergize at all with the second star, because you're either aiming down the sights and getting the plus 50 damage resistance, or you're using VATS to get the extra action points with each kill. So they don't work well together, although there is something to be said for having a weapon that's versatile like that. Although in general, I feel like you're better off with a weapon that is more specialized for the playstyle you're going for. And if you feel like switching playstyles, then switch weapons. But, you know, to each their own. That's just the way I feel about it. But even so, the third star is just not that exciting. If you've got 300 to 400 damage resistance already from your armor or power armor or whatever you're using, then another plus 50 is not going to be all that noticeable because of diminishing returns. It's not that it won't do anything, it absolutely will, but it is just not going to be a whole lot. And it's also worth keeping in mind that that is damage resistance only, not energy resistance or fire resistance or anything like that. So really, I think that's kind of a dud of a third star. Really, overall, this thing's a dud. So I've spent plenty of time talking about it. Let's go on ahead and move on to the next one. And here we've got a Gremans Short Western Revolver with plus 50% VATS hit chance and plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. So the Gremans effect on weapons, I guess it's called the Overeater's effect on armor, and it's very good on armor, the Overeater's effect. But the Gremans effect, I'm not a big fan of for weapons, because it's 12% damage bonus for each of your hunger and thirst meters being 100% full. So that comes out to 24% bonus damage if they're both 100% full, which it's not terrible. It's the 1% difference that you would see from like mutants or whatever is not really going to be all that noticeable. But at the same time, 24-25% is definitely significantly less than the 50% bonus you can get from aristocrats or junkies, or higher from bloodied, or even the benefit you can get from anti-armors. So it's just not exciting. And then unless you're running around using perfect bubblegum all the time. There are going to be times when your hunger and thirst meter are going to deplete, so you're going to get knocked off of that 24% damage to even low, at least somewhat frequently, unless you are regularly using things to prevent your hunger and thirst meters from declining, or you are super, super vigilant about it. So overall, I don't really think that's a very good first star. The second star, plus 50% VATS hit chance, is actually one of my favorite stars, second stars on weapons that are good for VATS, and the Short Western Revolver is definitely good for VATS. In fact, most people who, you know, each player is going to do things the way they want to do them, and that's totally cool, but I would definitely use pretty much any pistol in the game in VATS primarily just to get some extra damage by reliably targeting the weak points and getting those VATS critical hits, because unfortunately pistols in this game are a bit underpowered. So you really kind of need to do that to really make up for some extra damage if you really want to, you know, compete in the same way that other weapon classes do. You can't always, but you can come close with certain pistols. So anyway, the plus 50% VATS hit chance is very good for all of that, so that's a great second star. And then the third star is the same one we had before, plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. Once again, it does not synergize with the second star, and I think the second star on this particular weapon is much, much better than the third star, so it would be much better if the third star did actually synergize. Overall, this one is not necessarily the worst roll possible. I could see, you know, a lower level player using it until they got their hands on something better, because they're probably going to be keeping their hunger and thirst meters full anyway, so they're not really giving a whole lot up for the extra damage, and then the extra VATS hit chance is good. So it's not terrible, but it's definitely not exciting, so let's see what else we can get. And here we've got an Executioner Short Ultrasite Laser Pistol, with the last round in the magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage, and +1 Perception. So the Executioner's effect is, in the right situation, a very strong effect. That's because the plus 50% damage that it provides you when the target is below 40% health is still multiplicative, as I understand it anyway. I haven't checked it recently, but I know for a long time it still was, and I haven't heard anything about that changing, so I believe it still is. And that just makes it very, very powerful, because that means instead of 50% of the base damage of the weapon, it's 50% of the damage that you see on your damage card, even if you are using perks or chems or mutations or whatever to get some extra damage. So that's very powerful, with the big drawback being that it does absolutely nothing until the target hits 39% health or lower. So it's really going to be most useful against big tanky enemies like the endgame bosses, or even Super Mutant Behemoth or Mirelurk Queen or things like that. So you'll definitely get your best bang for your buck against those things, but with a lower damage weapon that fires quickly, you might manage to save yourself a round or two on a lot of normal enemies. It just depends on the weapon in question and how your character is built. Unfortunately, this is the Ultrasite Laser Pistol, because if it was a regular laser pistol, I might be somewhat inclined to try this thing out, although the second star is just bad. But because it's the Ultrasite Laser Pistol, it actually does less damage than the regular laser pistol, which seems kind of weird. That is the opposite of the way it is with the Gatling laser versus the Ultrasite Gatling laser. But with the laser pistols, or laser guns, however you want to do it, because you can mod this thing out to be a rifle, then the Ultrasite version is worse than the regular version. So that is also a drawback on this particular weapon. The last round of the magazine, as I mentioned, is the last shot effect, sorry. As I mentioned, is just a dud of an effect. Basically, you cannot count on it at all. It's, even with weapons with relatively low magazine sizes, it is still very hit or miss. You have no idea whether the shot you fire is going to actually trigger that double damage, even if you do empty the magazine. And I myself typically reload between battles whenever there's a lull, so I don't really empty the last magazine with a lot of weapons. So when you're doing that, you're never going to see any benefit from that second star. The third star, +1 Perception, it's not amazing, but it's not terrible. I don't think anyone's going to complain about an extra special, but the big benefit from Perception is that it gives a little bit of extra VATS accuracy, and really that's not all that much accuracy. It's not a huge deal. It's nice, I'm not going to complain about it, but at the same time, this weapon would be much better if it had a better 3rd star, but hey, this weapon would be much better if it had a lot of things different. So this one's more or less a dud as I see it. The only really good thing about it is the Executioner's 1st star, but let's see what else we can get. And here we've got a Furious Gauss Pistol with plus 50% VATS hit chance and 90% reduced weight. So this one is interesting to talk about anyway, because the Furious effect is really not one of my favorites, and that's mainly because you need to fire, I don't remember if it's 9, 10, 11, whatever shots on the enemy before you start seeing the full 50% damage bonus. I believe it's 50%. But the first shot does no extra damage with the Furious effect, and the second shot does 5% extra damage, and so on, until it hits the maximum damage of the weapon. If you happen to hit another enemy, then it resets the Furious effect, and that is a big drawback with an explosive weapon, which all Gauss weapons are explosive. So if there's an enemy within range of the explosion, which the explosion range is not very big on the Gauss weapons, so they'd have to be pretty close, but it will happen from time to time at least. And when it does, it will just basically prevent you from getting any bonus damage from the Furious effect in that situation, which is unfortunate. Also, the drawback with the Gauss weapons is that to get the best damage from them, you have to charge them up. And so the Furious effect is very much not a good combination with that, because you really need to be firing as quickly as possible for the Furious effect to give you its maximum benefit. But the Gauss weapons reward you for firing slowly, so they just don't work well together. The plus 50% VATS hit chance, that's a great effect. Once again, this is a pistol. It's not particularly underpowered compared to all other weapons in the game, like some of the pistols are, but compared to like the Gauss shotgun or the Gauss rifle, it is still a bit underpowered. So, you know, using VATS to get some extra damage wouldn't be such a terrible thing with this weapon, and getting some extra VATS accuracy while you're doing so is nice. The 90% reduced weight is kind of a dud on this particular weapon, just because, for one, pistols don't weigh a whole lot, so you're not really gaining a huge benefit by losing 90% of their weight. But also, pistols and rifles tend to have more weapon mod slots than a lot of other types of weapons, so it's important to keep in mind that those mods do not benefit from the 90% reduced weight. So you're basically going to end up with a weapon that's not all that much lighter than the original weapons. So, unfortunately, this one's pretty much a dud as well. Let's go on ahead and see what else Bremer has for us. And here we have a Vampire's Broadsider with replenishing action points with each kill, and hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. So, it seems like Bremer isn't really happy with me this week. I'm not sure what I did to her, but, you know, she's punishing us. The Vampire's effect is actually very good. It's one of my favorite 1st stars, but this is not the weapon I would really want to see it on. It's much, much better on a faster firing weapon, because the amount of health that you heal from the Vampire's effect is basically the same per hit, no matter how much damage you're doing or how fast you're firing. So heavy hitting weapons really don't get nearly as much benefit from the Vampire's effect as faster, softer hitting, I guess, weapons would. So that's unfortunate, but it's, you know, better than nothing. It's not stalkers or anything. The 2nd star, replenishing action points with each kill. You can put a mod on this thing. I believe it gives you 4 or 3, I can't remember which, cannonballs in the mag, which is definitely far, far better than a single cannonball in the mag and having to reload after every shot. But even so, you're still going to have to be reloading pretty frequently, and if you drop out of VATS and have a good VATS build, then you're not going to likely run out of AP all that often. Although, then again, it's a question of whether you would really use this weapon in VATS or not. As far as heavy weapons go, this is one of the weapons that would be a little bit better for VATS usage, but I myself, and I suspect most other players, don't really do a whole lot of VATS usage with their heavy weapons, but I do know of at least one player, my friend Draenok, who is an exception to that. When he's using his certain Gatling plasmas of his, he does use VATS a lot. So You know, it's to each player however they wish to play the game, but I really don't see that being a very useful second star on this weapon overall. The third star, hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. I'm not really sure about that on this one. I would expect it to not really be able to keep you effectively in stealth, but I did have one of my viewers comment one time that they were able to stay in stealth with a flamer with that third star. Now the flamer does fire a lot faster, so you're going to get a lot more hits and probably generate a lot more stealth fields, and that may have a lot to do with that. But I haven't really tested it, so I don't know that to be a fact, and I don't know for a fact that this will not work to keep you in stealth. I've tested it a bit with the commando type weapons and things like that, and it was good, but it didn't really feel necessary because the characters were already well built for stealth, whereas something like this you might not be so well built for stealth, and then it might be more useful. So I do want to try that out on a loud weapon, but I don't think this is really the weapon that I want to do that with. So let's see what else we've got. And here we get a Mutant short gamma gun with the last round in the magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage again, and plus 250 damage resistance while reloading. So the Mutant's effect is not terrible. It gives you 25% damage bonus if you've got at least 5 or more mutations, because it's 5% per mutation up to a maximum of 5, which isn't bad, and I think that most players in the end game will probably be running 5 or more mutations by the time you get Speed Demon and Marsupial, and either Herbivore, Carnivore, and then probably a couple of other mutations that suit your build particularly well. So you're not really giving a whole lot up for the benefit here, because you're probably already going to have all those mutations to get that. It's just that 25% is not as much as 50% that you can get from aristocrats and junkies and such. So it's not terrible, it's just not particularly exciting. The second star, the last round in the magazine, having 25% chance to deal double damage. We talked about that a little bit earlier. I still think it's crap. That hasn't changed. I don't think that will ever change, so we'll just move on. It's like not having a second star at all. The third star, plus 250 damage resistance while reloading. In theory, sounds like a good thing, because when you're reloading your weapon, you're potentially vulnerable, so getting some extra protection during that time sounds like a good thing, and it definitely would be. Unfortunately, if you've got 300 to 400 damage resistance from your armor or power armor or whatever it is you're using already, then you're going to see some pretty significantly less bonus from this than you would if you had well below that. That's just because of the diminishing returns of the way that armor works in this game. You will see some benefit for sure, but it just won't be as much as you would think. And just like with the 50 damage resistance while aiming effect, this is only damage resistance, not energy resistance, not fire resistance, not poison resistance, nothing like that. So overall, I think it's pretty much a bit of a dud third star as well. So overall, this one is, I'd call it mediocre, but probably on the lower side of mediocre. Let's see if we can get something good this time, Murmur, maybe? Well, this one's at least a little bit better. We've got the Juggernauts Pistol with plus 50% VATS hit chance and VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So the Juggernauts effect is kind of the opposite of the Bloodied effect. It gives you bonus damage if your health is at full. Unfortunately, it's harder to stay at full health than you might think, so it's going to be harder to be getting that extra damage than it is to keep getting the extra damage from the Bloodied effect. Now, I did have one of my viewers tell me about, I'm not sure exactly how it works, I haven't looked into it, but that there's a way to use the Juggernauts effect along with a low health build and end up with damage very similar to a Bloodied weapon. I haven't looked into seeing how that works. I could see that being plausible, but honestly, it seems like you might have to jump through some hoops for that sort of a thing, and I feel like you'd just be better off with a Bloodied weapon. Although I guess if you can't get a hold of one, but you can get a hold of a Juggernauts, that could be a benefit for you. Of course, if you are a full health player, then the Juggernauts effect is definitely going to be better than the Bloodied effect, because at least you're going to get some extra damage from it. Overall, though, I think there are definitely much better first stars for the full health players, such as aristocrats or junkies. So not exciting there, but the second and the third stars are pretty good. The plus 50% VATS hit chance we talked about earlier. Again, it's very good on this weapon. This is a weapon that you can most definitely use almost exclusively in VATS, so getting some extra damage from it, especially with a pipe pistol, or even if you mod it out as a rifle, for targeting those weak points is going to be a good thing. And then the VATS critical meter, filling 15% faster, is also going to get you some extra damage by getting you some extra critical hits, so that's also a good thing. So overall, this one is solidly mediocre, unlike the last one. It's not amazing by any means, but it is something that I could have seen myself using at some point in the game earlier on when I was a lower level player if I didn't have anything better. But once you get something better, I wouldn't really see any reason to go back to using that. So let's continue on here. We've got a few more polls. Let's see if maybe Murmur will give us something good. Well, not so much here. We've got a Gremans pipe bolt-action pistol. Basically the pipe pistol version of the hunting rifle. It can also be modded into a rifle. With plus 25% damage while aiming, and hits have a chance to generate a stealth field. So we talked about the Gremans effect before. Everything I said before about that still applies here. It's not the worst effect around by any means. It's just not particularly exciting because of the low maximum bonus and the fact that your hunger and thirst meters will deplete over time unless you're constantly using perfect bubblegum. So that's not exciting, not terrible. The plus 25% damage while aiming, especially on a weapon like this, for the right player, could be very good. I tend to use VATS even with a weapon like this almost exclusively, so I wouldn't get a whole lot from it. But if you're the type of player who prefers to aim down the sights as opposed to using VATS, then that's just 25% bonus damage for you for doing nothing but what you normally do when you play, and that's a very powerful effect for a second star. So that's a good thing, and because this thing is kind of like the pipe weapon version of the hunting rifle, I could see players being, like a sniper player, being more interested in using something like this than some other weapons with that, at least for, you know, some opening shots, if nothing else, before switching to something a little more effective when they start discovering where you are, or at least start searching for you, or whatever. Because the big drawback here being that it's going to be firing pretty slowly and have a low ammo capacity. So the third star, hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. This is one of those weapons I kind of feel like it's a wasted third star on, because if you're built for stealth effectively, then you should be able to stay in stealth in the majority of situations without too much difficulty. If you're full health build and you're having trouble doing that, then you're probably better off with getting a full set of chameleon armor if you don't already have it. And if you are a low health build, then you're probably better off getting a full set of unyielding armor if you don't already have it. So in either of those cases, I think that the benefit that those armors are going to give you to your stealth is going to be far, far better than this third star is going to give you. That said, if you are still having a little bit of trouble staying in stealth, or, you know, you're still working on building up your armor supplies or whatever, you know, you don't have all the pieces you need yet, then that could help keep you going until you get what you need. So it's not necessarily the worst effect here, but again, I don't find it particularly exciting. So overall, this one is still pretty mediocre. At least we're moving up from mediocre to craps, or from crap to mediocre. So hey, we're moving in the right direction. Come on, Murmur, we got a couple more tries. Give us something good here. Well, that's not it. We've got a Ghoul Slayer's Pipe Revolver with 25% faster fire rate, and your VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So the Ghoul Slayer's effect is probably one of the less useful of the Slayer's effects, just because ghouls are going to be pretty squishy most of the time to begin with. That you're not really needing a lot of extra damage to put them down in most cases. Not to mention that I don't know that it's really worth keeping a specific weapon around just to deal with ghouls. So that's not really great, and unfortunately it doesn't apply to anything else. Like the Hunter's effect applies to Scorch Beasts and the Scorch Beast Queen, which makes it a little bit more useful than it otherwise would be. But the Ghoul Slayer's effect has no crossover like that at this time. You know, maybe at some point they'll put some sort of a ghoul boss in the game, but as of right now, there's nothing like that, so there's no benefit there. The 25% faster fire rate, On fully automatic weapons, it's one of the most powerful second stars in the game. It just straight up increases your damage per second, and that's a good thing. On semi-automatic weapons, like the pipe revolver, for example, it really varies from weapon to weapon. For weapons that will already fire as quickly as you can pull the trigger, then it's not going to do much of anything. But for weapons like, for example, the Alien Disintegrator, where there's a delay between how quickly it'll fire again, no matter how quickly you're pulling the trigger, then it will reduce that delay and increase your fire rate, which is a good thing. And if I'm not mistaken, the pipe revolver is a bit slow like that, so I believe it will actually improve your DPS on this particular weapon. Although it's definitely not going to be as much of a benefit as it would be on a fully automatic weapon, but it's still a benefit. And then the VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. That we talked about before. Really good on pistols because they are a bit underpowered, so getting some extra damage from those VATS critical hits is definitely going to be a good thing with pistols. So, and getting more of those VATS critical hits because of the critical meter filling faster is going to make them even better. So the second and the third star on this weapon are pretty good. Unfortunately, the first star makes it a bit of a dud. It's not terrible, but once again, not exciting. So come on, we got one more try here, Murmur. How about you give us something good to wrap the day up with? And she almost did, I guess. We've got an Executioner's Ultrasite Gatling laser with bashing damage increased by 50% and plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. So the Executioner's effect is, we talked about that earlier, it's one of the more powerful effects in the right situation. Now, this is definitely the kind of weapon that you would be able to get some serious benefit from the Executioner's effect on, because the weapon has relatively low per shot damage, but an extremely high fire rate. So that means that getting that extra damage per shot may actually even save you a round or two of damage on many of your daily farming type enemies, and that's a good thing. And it's also the Ultrasite Gatling laser, not the regular Gatling laser, so that's also a good thing because, remember, unlike the laser pistols rifles, the Gatling lasers, the Ultrasite version is better. So that's good. Unfortunately, the bashing damage increased by 50% is one of the worst second stars in the game, except for miniguns that are running the Shredder mod. If it's a minigun and you're going to put the Shredder mod on it, then the bashing damage increased by 50% is very, very strong because it increases the melee damage of that weapon by a significant margin. In pretty much every other situation, it's almost worthless because the base bashing damage in this game is already pretty low, so adding 50% of that to itself is not really going to do a whole lot for you, unfortunately. And then the 50 damage resistance while aiming. Well, this is definitely the kind of weapon that I think even my friend who uses VATS with his Gatling plasmas would still typically aim down the sights or hip fire, just because you're going to burn through your AP pool so quickly because of its high fire rate that you're going to be forced to do a lot of that even if you are trying to use it in VATS. So getting some extra damage resistance while you're aiming this thing would definitely be a good thing. But even so, I would still rather see a better third star, like 90% reduced weight, for example. But definitely not our worst roll of the day, but unfortunately we really did not get anything all that exciting. I'm not sure we really got anything that's even worth taking out for a spin today. So we'll try again next week and hopefully we'll do better. So please remember, if you enjoyed my content, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and it doesn't cost any money. And until next time, thank you for watching.